showing up
No, it's
for our YPN networking group. We got a lot of announcements for you. We'll hang that out to the end. Okay, so just make sure you stick around. Not just the fact that we have an awesome guest here, and I have a lot of info to go through, but just stick around for the announcements for some events coming up. And we are going to talk about the green sheet. We're going to move into our...
Who has been around for a long, long time. He was Salesperson of the Year in 1985, Realtor of the Year in 1990. 2010, he was awarded the C.O. Nelson Award, which is now the Doyle Pargin Lifetime Achievement Award. He's been the president of GAR. He's been the president of what was...
Not GAR.
Not GAR?
No,
okay.
First vice president, but became president of NMAR.
Okay, NMAR, and it was random at the time, right? Or
yeah, they were afraid I would be president of both organizations simultaneously.
Okay.
So I ducked out.
Also an NAR director for many, many years. You sat on the Real Estate Commission in New Mexico for many years.
I've never been a commission person, but I was on the Education Advisory Committee.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you have a wealth of knowledge for us.
Well, that remains to be seen. Okay.
We're very happy. We're very happy to have you here with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So let's tell us a little bit about how did it start off for you? What brought you into real estate? Was there something that we talked a little bit earlier about? We both know Jim Maddox. We know what he did before he was a realtor. What did you do before you were a realtor?
Well, I was a professor at University of New Mexico in the history department. Came out from Ohio State University back in 1967 to do that. And then we decided to take a university position out east of Pittsburgh, the State University in Pennsylvania. And children came down with asthma problems and so forth. Also, when I was a professor down here back in the late 60s, I learned to hike all the mountains if I could. I was not a mountain climber, but a mountain hiker. And when I got back to Pennsylvania, there were fences everywhere, and the kids were not happy. And so after a year at that university, I decided to come back. I've always been a salesperson at heart. And one time I was a Fuller Brush man. I was between undergraduate and graduate school, went door to door for 9 months with a wife and 2 children.
Oh, wow.
And so I like the idea of selling. I like the idea of independence. And I felt I can come back here and live here and do what I'd like to do, be my own boss, as it were, and get a real estate license. And that way I can determine my own income and my own involvement. So that's how I made the transfer.
And that's a common. I think that's a common thing that a lot of people say. Why did you join real estate? So I could be my own boss. So I could dictate how much money I make myself.
Well, I like real estate because there's no glass ceiling.
Right.
Women, even to this day, around in industries and companies, there is a glass ceiling. They're held back. But I'm so pleased what women can do in this industry based upon what they produce, not their gender. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, my wife's a realtor as well.
Sure.
And it's incredible to watch. I mean,
well, I think realtors as a group are the best group of people in the country. Better than Methodists or Baptists or Catholics as a group. I have nothing but the greatest esteem for people who are realtors.
Well, that's actually why I'm here. I can tell you, I started off, I was a bartender for a long, long time. I became a realtor because I got kind of talked into it.
Yeah.
And then I started volunteering here.
Yes,
and
wonderful.
Volunteering at GAR was what made it for me. Being around the other realtors and seeing how giving they are.
Well, that's how you grow. How you grow.
Well, and it's really a team. It's so incredible. There's so much, competition in every industry, and people are so cutthroat. Realtors for the most part are together. Everybody grows together.
I was at a realtor meeting in Washington D.C. some years ago, and the guy came up from the hallway. I've been listening to you guys. You're the only group of competitors who actually like each other. That's what he said to me.
Wow.
In other words, you party together. You enjoy each other.
Yeah.
And back before COVID, we used to get together and party too.
Yeah. Well, did you ever remember thinking when you started that you would be this involved with the organization and everything?
No, I had no ambition in that direction. I just wanted to respond to the moment and the challenges of the moment. But I did evolve. At one point, I became a contractor while I was a realtor as well. Back in the mid-'70s, and also when it looked like franchises were the future and the present.
Century 21.
Back in '77, I bought a Century 21 franchise. Wanted to move in that direction, Nationwide Realty, Century 21. And then when the interest rates jumped to 18 and 19% in the early 80s, I decided to close this firm down and move into commercial real estate in order to get a CCIM designation, and managed the largest commercial firm in the state in 1984 with John Lewinger, Walker Hinkle Commercial. And one thing sort of evolved into another to another, more or less by the situations, not by any long-range plan.
Well, it certainly speaks volumes to a lot of our, our newer realtors out there that say, oh, I'm just going to do this just for an income or whatever.
Well, I know, and that's not how the organization creates its reputation.
Right.
You come in, you learn the trade, you volunteer, and if you volunteer, you grow. I've done many hours of service for this board and for the state association, national association, and all of that is a growth experience in your own personal life.
Yes.
And the people you work with, the contacts you make, it's more than simply being knocking on doors for an open house.
I can tell you that, well, and see, that's what my experience has been as well. Being a volunteer here and joining boards and joining committees and things like that.
Sure.
I really love the idea of, it goes back to something my grandmother told me a long, long time ago about, if you're the smartest person in the room, get out, go find another room,
Right.
And so I find that, being in committees, there's always something that I can learn. There's always some kind of growth that I can get from just being at a table with somebody like
Sure.
you, Lou, or being,
Sure.
there's just a wealth of knowledge around.
Well, that happened to me. Virginia Clausen, picture on the wall, the second woman president of this board.
Yeah.
By happenstance, she met me in 1984. She was going to be the first chairman of the Random Strategic Planning Committee, and was selecting herself 15 people from around the state, top leaders from around the state in real estate, to be on that committee. And by a chance meeting her in her office, she was impressed. She took me under her wing. She became my mentor. She knew everything at the national level, the state level, the local level. And she changed my life and redirected it, because she said, if you work with me, I'll show you the ropes. And Virginia Clausen, one of a kind.
Wow.
Yeah, you never know. That just, again, goes to show you never know what will happen just by putting yourself out there and volunteering.
That's right.
helping
Well,
out.
one thing leads to another, right?
Well, and that led you into into big things. You became the president of Random.
Yeah, because of Virginia.
Because of Virginia.
Mhm.
And then from there, you became an NAR director.
For 10 years, I was an NAR director, and because of my contacts there, Virginia and others, I was named the chairman of the NAR Commercial Investment Committee in '93, and our group came up with the idea of the commercial overlay boards, which allowed for Carnum to come into existence, because this board had a exclusive franchise 30 miles from the downtown courthouse, and we needed to have a commercial board in this town for commercial brokers, so that's what we did there. I worked with lawyers, became the chairman of the Risk Management Committee, 1995 for NAR, and gave me a lot of confidence working with lawyers from around the country and around the organization. And if you're smart enough, you find out there are people out there you get to know better, and they became my mentors.
Nice. Nice. Well, and then that led you to basically where we are now as transaction brokers. Right?
Well,
you want to
that's
tell
right.
that story?
I said before, MLS was built by NAR back in the early 60s, whatever, by saying your competitors can be agents of your office.
Right.
All your competitors down the street will be sub-agents. So that's how they created sub-agency, and that's how they created the idea of the MLS. You'll cooperate with your competitors. And that made it happen. And so you could not put a listing in a board MLS from that date on until 1992 by directive vote by the NAR directors without offering sub-agency to the person working with the buyer.
Okay.
Then people came along and said, like Ralph Nader and some others, if you're working with buyers, shouldn't the buyer have their agent as their agent, not the agent of the seller through sub-agency? So the can of worms that worked so well came off the lid around 1987, 88, 89. Buyer agency came into the fore. And so then they had disclosed dual agency, which is really oxymoronic. How do I obey you and I'm loyal to the other party? I disclose everything, but I have a duty of confidentiality to both of you. It's an oxymoronic contradiction in terms. And so I felt back in the 90s when I was the director of NER, along with some other people, that agency was not the way we should do business because it was too risk prone. In fact, it was pretty hard to explain to anybody how you disclose everything and yet keep it all confidential. It's what I would call an attorney's field day to make you really a loser.
Right.
And so Oliver Frascona, the wonderful attorney from Colorado, he's gone now, he coined the term in 1993, transaction broker, and made it statutory in Colorado in 93, and I caught on to the idea with him. And so I allowed people like that, and Jim Eckley down in Arizona, another wonderful attorney, to grow into the situation that maybe we should have something different. I want to mention to you the genius of what we have with transaction brokerage is not transaction brokerage. The genius is you are only an agent if you have a written agency agreement that creates it.
Right, which is interesting to me. As a property manager, I have that with all of
And
my
you sign it up
clients.
that way.
Yeah, you sign it up. That's
But
absolutely how
before,
it
in
works.
Colorado at that time, you were a transaction broker if you opted out of agency. And
Okay,
I talked to a
So
wonderful
instead of
lady-
having to opt in, you actually had to
that's
opt
right.
out.
And I got that idea from a director from Idaho, who I knew well, and she said there's somebody up in Idaho that said, why don't you make it you opt into agency rather than opt out? And they never did it in Idaho, but that's what I done here. In other words, if you want to be an agent, be grown up about it, have a scope of authority, a written document like you do with your property management. Otherwise, you are a professional with license, with professional duties. Huh?
Well, it changes everything.
It
I
does.
mean, it changes the idea of agents being
Well,
sued. For
yeah, you're
things
right.
that,
But once people in New Mexico had a chance to be a transaction broker without agency, within 6 months, everybody was working that way. Because they didn't have to be sold on the idea.
Yeah. And you said that you wrote this on a napkin.
Yeah, Bill Campbell, chairman of the legislative committee for Ranham. He's the one that made it happen, by the way.
Okay.
He got the legislative committee unanimously behind this, wrote it on a napkin in a hotel lobby up in Santa Fe, had to be submitted to the rewrite group for the legislative group up in Santa Fe, the legislature. But he's the one that carried it through. And he's the one that got it through both houses in the state legislature. There was not a single negative vote, I'm told, but it was sold beautifully because it made sense. And then Governor Gary Johnson signed it without a whimper.
Wow.
And a lot of lawyers were upset.
Yeah. So what we did is we advanced ourselves 20 years beyond what NER was doing. I saw a little plaque here in the building right here. NER sent out, it said, not all agents are realtors. They sent it out from headquarters.
Yeah.
And I went to the front desk and I said, why don't we change that? Not all realtors are agents. But NER cannot, to this day, get rid of the idea that agency is better than anything else. Agency does not add quality. Agency adds responsibility because you, as a property manager, have been authorized to make decisions that are binding for your agency principal, right?
Oh, yeah.
So therefore, you owe fiduciary duties because you're making decisions.
Yeah, and if I make the wrong decision, I owe.
And if you make the wrong decision, they're held accountable for it too. It's called respondeat superior.
Yes, sir.
So it's not a very simple relationship.
No, and a lot of states, it's interesting to me that a lot of states still carry agency. I mean, I understand, is it Texas? Texas still an agency state?
Well, all states are basically agency states. They have come up with dual agency, and they call it transactional brokers, so you're an intermediary that way. But it takes somebody who wants to put their shoulder to the wheel to say, we're going to make a change. And when you do that, you make friends and you make enemies.
Sure.
I had a person from Texas in a class, and she said, I know the president, I think, of the Texas Real Estate Commission. I like the way you explain transaction brokerage. I'm going to have her give you a call, so maybe you can share this with her. And of course, never was a call.
Right.
In
She
other
want
words,
to
if
hear
you're-
about it?
If you're going to go against the main paradigm, you better be prepared to put effort into it.
That's right.
And that's what we accomplished in New Mexico.
That's incredible. It's
Thank
incredible.
you.
Well, and it really, I mean, it changes everything. It really, just the thought of.
But it doesn't cut back on quality.
No.
Because if you have a license, you have to give the highest quality you can muster for anybody, whether it's agency or transaction brokerage. Otherwise, the courts are waiting for you.
Well, right, and I think that that's where being a realtor and having a code of ethics and being in an association.
Sure, and the Realtor Code of Ethics recognizes legally recognized non-agency relationships.
Right.
It mentions it in Article 1.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It
Oh, man.
always surprises me, by the way, at how much innovation happens in New Mexico. You mentioned like how this basically was one of the first states that started that type of stuff, but we've heard from a lot of our other podcast guests that
and we've had some very bright and able people in New Mexico. And there was a president of NAR from Mexico, Bill Brown, Sam Brown's brother back in the early 70s. And so, no, we've had some really wonderful people here. We really have. And I learned from them.
Excellent. So some of the questions that came up in our group relate to, what life was like as a realtor, before, I mean, it's really funny to think of how easy, a lot of us have it nowadays. I mean, like I try to think of what property management for Jim Maddox was back in the 70s when, like we managed somewhere near 800 properties, and I have a whole system, like a cloud-based system where I can look things up at will. I can know anything about any of my properties just on my phone.
Well, let me respond to that generally. There used to be the MLS had a crap sheet they sent out every day, and we put it into a little booklet, all the new listings, the expireds, the solds. So somebody had to do that back in the 60s and early 70s. And then a guy named Bill Elliott, who's been around for years, and he was a member of this board, and also he's been a mortgage broker. He came to town representing a company that was going to put terminals in our offices, not computers, but terminals, with a thermal fax printout, a long piece of paper, and it was going to do away with the crap sheets. And I was in the building over here when that was being presented, and there were 100 real estate people in this building or in our membership who said, if we're not going to have the crap sheets anymore in our hand and we're going to thermofax with a terminal, we're resigning from the board. That was our first move back around 1975 toward automation.
Right, people didn't want it.
They didn't know. They
didn't want change.
People, no one likes change. They say they do, but they don't. And Bill Elliott is the guy that brought that in.
Right. And we were talking about the idea of lock boxes and like the different technology that's evolved to make our jobs easier is so incredible. The idea that you can look on MLS on your phone, and the idea that things.
But that same technology that makes it easier for us makes us vulnerable that we can be replaced if we're not professionals.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We talked about that on our podcast many times about the idea that our professionalism and our willingness to learn more and to gain more knowledge and to be around people that can teach us things. That's really what's going to make the cream rise to the top.
Exactly right, because the only thing we offer that the technology doesn't is professional knowledge and involvement.
Right.
And that's always going to be important if we can deliver it.
Well, and it's incredible how sometimes you take for granted the idea that you might think how things are supposed to go until something happens that you just have never seen before, and that's when it's always good, to have like the Jim Maddox or the Barb Maddox in the office that has the past knowledge of what actually goes on.
That helps. It really does.
Yeah.
I like to tell people I'm the link to the past and also to the future simultaneously.
Absolutely.
Because I'm looking both directions.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, back in 1984, there was an appeals court case in New Mexico, a second one in the country after California earlier that summer. The Gouveia case that said real estate people have a duty to disclose what they know or should know. We became a should-know state, and I'll tell you, the should-know is something that we have to take a certain sense of. Should I know that kind of thing? I said to some lawyers down at the Madro Law Firm years ago, we never know as brokers what we should know until we get sued. And they chuckled and laughed and said, that's too bad, isn't it? So the should know is the heart of our professional obligation.
Right.
Wow.
So just keep learning.
Well, keep learning and keep learning around the corner.
Yeah.
Because something else is coming up,
Absolutely.
Well, I look at all the stuff that's going on now with multiple offers being presented. that is a tremendous erosive force on buyers, making sure they get this inspection, this kind of concession, whatever it might be. In other words, if there's 10 or 15 or 20 offers in there simultaneously, it's no secret if you really are asking for the seller to make all kinds of concessions and pay expenses, probably your offer is not going to be accepted.
Right.
So we're actually having an erosive impact right now on the professionalism that we cherish.
Well, actually, I want to take it back to that.
Yeah.
When was the time before where we're in that type of seller's market where there are multiple offers? How did that turn out from years past?
Well, we've never been in this situation ever in the history of real estate in this country, period.
Wow.
In other words, you have the storm of interest rates that are around 3, above or below. They're typically at 5 and 6 and 7, something like that through the years. And there's low down payment for people. And also there's corporate entities that are moving in on cash purchases. They have front people that are doing it for them, and they're buying up properties. They may be Wall Street firms and so forth. And they're going out there and doing all cash with no concessions, and then turning them into rentals, whatever it might be. We're having a tremendous problem with affordability, and we don't have enough product, as you know.
Right.
We've been behind the 8 ball in that whole matter for years now. We don't have enough new, and also we have zoning and NIMBY items, not my neighborhood.
Yeah.
But where do people go that really need to get a starter home?
Right.
And the answer is not LA, not Santa Fe, not Albuquerque.
Well, not Albuquerque now that our median house.
No, and not Farmington.
Yeah.
And believe it or not Alamogordo either.
Be Los Lunas? Is that where we're trying to narrow that down? Where do
Oh,
people
yeah.
go for a starter
So
home?
we're in a
Grow
perfect
rancho?
storm right now, and it will not last forever.
Well, and you know, that's a common underlying thing. You know, I talk to a lot of realtors all the time, and being on the board, you come into contact with a lot of people, and, you know, talking about what the market looks like right now and what is happening right now, that one of the main things that I keep, the main thing that keeps coming to my mind is the idea of being professional and what our actual obligation and whether we're really providing the service that we should be. You know, a lot of times, especially with the multiple offer situations we have nowadays in this market, we've got people advising to waive appraisal or there's things that are set in place to protect and
due diligence.
Right.
Yeah. Set aside this is going to be, I believe, an attorney's field day in 2 years.
Oh my God!
When the people move in and found out they really didn't get all they expected, because that happens when they buy properties.
Right, and they're buying them so fast and at such big prices.
But I think
it's like,
2
are you
years
really
from
getting
now,
the value?
we're going to be sued like you can't believe by attorneys for very unhappy buyers.
I feel like I'm afraid of what's coming.
That's what they're there for.
Right, and they're waiting.
Well, yeah,
They're waiting. They're waiting.
Yeah.
And but I'm just saying that when you have, what's the most multiple offer situation you've heard of or seen?
Oh boy, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I've heard of 30 plus offers.
Okay, you know the sad part of that? 29 brokers didn't get a deal.
Right, and probably 20 brokers didn't even get a call back.
Yeah, I'm thinking we have a number of members of GAR and elsewhere who are not making a living right now because the competition's too tight. Oh, that's great. There are 30 offers. That's fine. 29 didn't get it, and you're getting buyer fatigue. Mm-hmm. So this is a time that we need to emphasize our professional involvement. But this will not last. It cannot last.
Right.
I'd like you to look at the Code of Ethics preamble, the very first paragraph. The preamble's not enforceable, and it says we're here to make sure we serve our communities, make sure there's affordable housing, make sure there's wide distribution of ownership. It's all there in the preamble. Mm-hmm. And this is a high calling of being a realtor, not simply being an order taker.
Right. Well, and that's the fear. I see a lot of young realtors jumping in right now, and we want young realtors, of course, but what I see is people seeing the cash and going, oh, I should do this, and not necessarily going into it with I want to serve the public and I want to give the best service. More of I want
follow
money.
The money trail.
Right.
That's right.
Well, but I feel like those realtors won't last.
Well, they may not. Well, they'll be here when the cash is there. They'll be gone when the cash isn't.
Right.
But again, we need to keep in mind that we're in a very difficult situations right now. We've never, in my lifetime, never seen anything quite like this. I remember in 1982 when the interest rates went up to 18 and 19%. That was a major disruption. And if it weren't for seller carrybacks with real estate contracts in New Mexico, we would not have survived. And then the law was passed at the federal level that the lenders would be able to have due on sale clauses that were enforceable. So that killed the seller carryback business. But that was a major crisis. And we've had other crises along the way. But and we had the crisis of 2007 and 2008. We knew that couldn't last forever. They were giving mortgages to everybody, then chopping them up and selling them as securities to people on Wall Street and being sold all over the world until we had to bail out. Federal government had to bail out Wall Street.
Yeah. I can tell you, as a property manager, my phone rings off the hook, and it's always. I've got nonstop every day. I've got people calling me that are just saying, I've been looking to buy for a year. I can't find anything.
Can I rent?
Can I rent? And right now the answer is no.
No, you can't.
I don't have anything.
Well, I talk to
literally.
when I teach classes, I always pick people's brains, like I'm picking yours and so forth. I talked to a person the other day, and he said, I think on the apartments around the city, not talking about houses, there's probably a 2% vacancy rate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and in other words, it's really low.
Yeah.
And so where do people go?
I can't even tell you. I can tell you that we're doing our darndest to try and keep everything going. But people aren't moving. It's like 2 years ago, this same time of year, I would have, going into the school year, this is when I would probably have my largest inventory. Right now, people are moving out so that they can find something else for the next school term. Yeah. Right now, that's not happening. 2 years ago, I would have a harder time renting my 3-bedroom houses than I could rent a 1-bedroom, because the 1-bedroom, people were just looking for somewhere cheap to stay that they can go and do whatever else they did.
In fact, are they renting it without seeing it too?
Now they're applying without seeing it. They're applying without even I'm literally having people put money down, I need it now. I don't care what it is.
Okay, this will not last.
No, and it shouldn't last.
No,
it will
not last.
Yeah.
The nature of the universe, it will not last. Yeah. And it shouldn't either.
Well, I think the basic nature of a consumer is that, they might be doing what they need to do to survive right now, but at some point they're going to go, wait a minute, I need to get my value.
Well, let's put it here. Realtors are a tremendous force. There's over 1 million realtors at the national level.
Yes, sir.
And we're people who have the community at heart. We're special, as I said before. We need to lead the way to make sure this is solved, not simply go for the next closing.
Yeah, boots on the ground.
Because this will not last.
Right.
In fact, maybe it's time for us to join hands and say the realtor prayer together. Do you know the realtor prayer?
No, sir.
No, there is no realtor
Okay.
prayer.
I'm please bless me.
You got suckered into that one. In other words, what we do
all the time.
we roll up our sleeves and make it happen. That's what realtors do.
Yes,
well,
sir.
My hope is we mentioned the younger realtors just getting the commission breath. My hope is that they are going to follow in what I see as your footsteps, talking about when you started, you had no intention of getting that involved, hoping that those people now are going to do the same thing, because that's what is going to keep them sticking around. And
but we need to get involved in solving the problems that are not being solved right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're tremendous problems. In fact, part of this is zoning, R1 zoning. This was very good for the 50s and 60s. Everybody had their large lot and so forth. You couldn't have a duplex or a fourplex or whatever it might be in certain areas. Had to be C1 or whatever it was, R2 or I guess R3.
Right.
And that's got to change. It's been changed in Minneapolis, and I'm not sure what the answer is, because the answers are not obvious. But if we don't have answers, we're in difficulty.
Well, there's a lot of cities that grew too fast and had to go back. Like you look at Detroit. They expanded greatly to where they were too big, and they ended up having to kind of downsize.
That's when the auto industry changed.
Right.
It all goes back to jobs and economics.
Right.
And I'm concerned about our climate. I'm concerned about water. I've been here since '67, basically. And the Rio Grande, there was an article in the Albuquerque paper a week ago. Is it the Rio Grande or the real sand? I don't know if it's the front page.
Well, look at Elephant Butte.
And Elephant Butte is only, a third of its capacity, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible how low it is.
Then there was an article someplace I saw the other day about people up north of Mora, where Barbara Maddox came from, and the acequias up there are drying up. And in California, they're determining whether the acequias for almond groves and so forth are going to get the water, or whether the cities are going to get the water. And I don't know when this is all going to change, but I'm surprised that companies going to Phoenix right now, for instance, where it's too hot and they don't have really a good water supply except from the Colorado, with the cap, the water coming over that way, why they're spending billions of dollars. And then I think of Chaco Canyon. You ever been to Chaco Canyon?
I love Chaco.
Okay.
So one of the greatest things, I mean, if you haven't been to Chaco, you got to go to Chaco.
Yeah, you know why Chaco didn't succeed?
Why?
Because it wasn't built close enough to the freeways. No, climate change.
Sure.
And there was a disbursement of the people to the pueblos and so forth. But Chaco had commercial contacts all the way into Mexico and so forth.
Well, yeah, they've got parrot feathers found in there, and
they do.
Cocoa beans. They have trees that
but
came
I'm just
from
saying,
hundreds and hundreds of miles
we've got to
away.
make sure that we take care of our market, our people, because we're realtors.
Right.
Code of Ethics Preamble, Article 1.
Well, it's interesting to think of, how time is cyclical like that. Chaco Canyon at the time was the mecca of the central world. People came from all over to trade, and most of that history is pretty well unknown to us still to this
Have
day.
you ever gone down to Mountain Air and seen the big ruins down there?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
What's it called?
Are you talking about the
Pueblo ruins, abandoned.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yes.
And totally empty. Something happened.
Right.
And I used to be a history prof. I used to be an ancient history prof. So that sort of is my scope of my consideration. Peoples come and go. People migrate because they're desperate.
Yeah.
And that's happened all the way through history.
Right. You go down, my wife and I were in Mexico a couple of years ago, down near Puerto Morelos.
Oh, sure.
And they're still digging up ruins, daily that, like huge things where, thousands and thousands of years old, where it's literally like an entire city is just.
They had bigger cities in Mesoamerica at that time than they did in Europe.
Right.
And I think they probably disappeared in part because of the diseases that were brought over by the conquistadors. Okay. Smallpox, they had no protection for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's good news. What do you want to know about the past?
I was going to say, is there any hope out of that doom and gloom discussion about water?
No, we're not doom and gloom. We're talking about we've got a job to do.
Right, okay.
And I'll tell you, this organization contributes good money for the community, right? There's a fund.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that we need to expand on.
Okay.
We are the people that can make a difference in this community, in this country, this state. The realtors are the people that can do it. We've got to do it. Better than any other group.
Well, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. The realtors get together, and if we need policy change, realtors get together and we go to the legislature. If we need something to happen in the city, realtors get together, they go to the city council.
You're absolutely right.
We get in front of.
There is no other group
to.
Like this group. We can make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I think
because of who we are.
I think we are.
Yeah, we are. But I say the mantle falls upon our shoulders.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. Well, and I think that's something to absolutely remember, is that level of care, that preamble to our code of ethics.
Oh, yes.
That is who we are.
This is who we are. This is why we're here, and this is how we face every new challenge.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You hear that, guys? Mantle's on your shoulders. Take a second out of your day to just think about exactly what Lou's saying about the community and everything, and how we can help as realtor organization. Absolutely.
Good.
I think that's something worth remembering, worth noting to everyone.
Thank you.
Well, and where do you? So we talk a lot about growth in Albuquerque, and we're kind of pigeonholed in a spot. A lot of times they talk about how we can't have new construction because either we can't move north, or we can't move east because of the mountain, or can't move west because of Mesa.
Mesa del Sol, south of the airport.
Right. So where, well, and that's what, when you, like last night I saw the two mayor candidates speak, and, Mayor Keller talks quite often about Mesa del Sol. That is the new subdivision.
I think
That'll
it
be
is.
the new suburb.
I think it is.
There's a huge amount of space out there.
And Rio Rancho.
If
Rio Rancho had not been created by AMREP back in the early 60s, and nothing had been done up there, our city could not have grown. The factory got bridges that actually went across the river. I don't know if you're aware of the fact, but there were people that
I know that nobody wanted the Montano Bridge.
They didn't
for
want
most
the
of my
Montano
life,
Bridge.
Right? Yeah.
And that was not forward thinking. What would we do without the Montano Bridge
Oh, man.
or the Paseo de In fact, have you gone
Imagine
up
what
to
traffic
have you
would
gone
be
to
like.
Bernalillo at all?
Yeah.
And you see all the traffic there. They're widening the streets
Yep.
so that people can get into the north side of Rio Rancho.
Yeah.
So there were forward-thinking people all along through all those crises through the years. Bless them, they made it happen.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where we're going with Mesa del Sol and the new subdivisions shorter.
But see, when I
south.
came here in this town in 1967, the economy was different.
Well, the whole city was different. We
It
talked to Bill
was
Dodge
different, but I was told
ago.
that I should live in the Northeast Heights when I came from Columbus, Ohio. And I bought a house for $12,500.
Wow.
I could not afford a $26,000 house on my professor's salary. But the pay has gone up and the houses are getting out of sight. And I'm just saying we've got work to do because we have too many people on the streets. We have too much crime. And we have too many people that are being hassling. I mean, I read the paper every day. Somebody else is being shot. It's a law enforcement person or a neighbor, whatever it might be. And so we've got work to do as realtors.
Well,
and we're the group that can lend our influence to the people that make it happen.
I think all of those are symptoms of stress on the economy.
Oh, sure is. Sure is.
Crime and homelessness and
sure is.
those kinds of things happen when people are in despair or
Well, what
in
if
jeopardy.
what if they can't rent one of your houses? Where do they go? An RV?
Or
Yeah, I mean, believe me,
A car?
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, that's sad. Because
Well, and we talk about like the rents are dictated by price, by the sales market,
Yeah.
and a lot of it, investors they see what things are selling for, they see what the market looks like as a sales market, and then they start calling me and saying, hey, let's raise our rents.
Well, let's talk about
problem with that is you have somebody on housing. Somebody on housing, they only have what is allotted to them. They don't get to necessarily say, okay, so can you please
That's
put
right.
the rent back to where my
That's
housing
right.
will pay for it.
But what's going to happen when the moratorium on foreclosures expires, whenever
Scared
that
to
is?
death, Lou.
It's going to put people on the streets.
Yeah.
And they're going to come to Maddox to get a property they can rent, and you're going to say we don't have enough for you. So that's probably the immediate looming crisis coming up.
Right.
When the people are put on the streets.
Yeah.
And where they can't even rent.
Right. Well, and people are getting so much in debt that, I mean, the debts that are piling up over this past year with this moratorium are incredible.
But I'm saying if foreclosure now is going to really come along, it will in the future. People don't have the money perhaps to pay their bills on that. Where do they go? If they have to get out of a house, where do they go? They go to Maddox, and Maddox says, we don't have many houses. And others along the way. So anyway, this is an interesting time to be alive.
Yes, it is. Well, and I think that it'll all kind of work itself out. As there becomes foreclosures, there will become more properties available.
But remember,
again,
the Roman Empire fell.
Yeah, I try as hard as I can to not think of us as the Roman
And
Empire.
Chaco Canyon became abandoned.
Right, but we got to keep going as long as we can.
And remember I said we'll say the realtor prayer together? And you had a puzzled look on your face.
Yep.
And I said, realtors don't have a prayer. We have action.
Yes.
What do you want to ask me about the past?
Oh, man.
I knew everybody.
I'm sure you do. Well, and so this is, I think really what we're learning right now is, the past lives to repeat itself, right? Or what's the famous thing, if you do
Past is prologue for the future.
well, if you don't learn from your past,
You're going to
destined
repeat the same
repeat it,
mistakes.
right?
You got it right.
I guess that's where we are. You
Yeah.
grow too fast, you grow too big. You don't work on
Well,
infrastructure.
when
what
people
happens?
aren't paying attention to the basics. When that happened back in 2006 and 7 and 8, and everybody could get a mortgage like you couldn't believe, we knew it could last.
Right.
And they could see it coming down the road. But no one wants to remove the punch bowl when the party's going on.
Right.
That's human nature.
Yeah, well, I'm curious as to, because you
I'm
said
not saying gloom. I'm just saying
Yeah.
we've got to be involved.
Well, you said that about now, right, where our market where we're in now, it can't continue.
We don't have product.
Well, yeah, but so the way I see it back in 2008 was obviously it was the mortgage industry's fault.
Well, everyone has its every time it's crisis.
But we've
you
shored
look
up
at from the GAR statistics. They had how many detached single-family homes in May?
Well, that's what I was saying at the beginning of the
600
show.
and some.
The difference
Yeah.
a year makes.
Yeah.
A year ago we had 1,600 detached homes this month.
Okay.
Right now
Yeah.
we have 836. We have less than 1,000.
Okay.
That's less than
And how
half of
many
what we
are
had.
how many are members of this organization?
Oh wow. Well,
Of GAR?
You're talking about the sellers?
About 4,300
Or,
anyway, right?
listing?
yeah.
4,300
6,000
people chasing
statewide.
800 listings.
Yeah.
That's not rocket science.
It's hard. Well, and people are still doing business. It's really incredible.
Somebody is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and some people are going back and forth. There's definitely headaches.
No, it takes extra work, but I'm just saying there's some underlying economic gaps that need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we've certainly shored up the mortgage side of things. I personally don't think that that's going to be the reason why. If we're talking about an economic collapse the next couple of years, it's not going to be.
Well, let's
on the
put it this way,
mortgage
too. The Fed is under a certain amount of pressure from certain people, and the Wall Street Journal, they talk about it. Maybe we're going back into inflation. And, building costs, for lumber, on a house, a single house, the building material cost went up like $30,000 on a $500,000 house that quickly for artificial reasons, but it went up.
We joke about, so a year and a half ago, I built a chicken coop, right?
There you go.
And I bought 8 pieces of plywood, and each piece of plywood was $11, right?
There you go.
Nowadays, I wouldn't have built the same damn chicken
Okay,
coop.
what-
We would have
what-
figured out some other way to do it because I wouldn't have.
When by 8 by 10 plywood would not be $7 or $8, it'd be $30.
Right. So now all of a sudden my stupid chicken coop cost me $1,000 instead of the $300 that I spent on it. Like, why would I wouldn't want chickens at that point.
Yeah, anyway, this is a very interesting time to be alive. It's time to be optimistic. It's time to be working for solutions.
Forward thinking.
And forward thinking, because it will not, by default, heal itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, I've been around for a half of the time that GAR has been here. I remember when it was over on Lead, the headquarters, and the executive officer was Walt Williams.
And so you've been here before this building.
Oh, yes. And then Max Manser came along. He was probably the greatest executive officer among others. He was tremendous, and I would not put anybody down. I think we're really blessed to have Kent Cravens. He's really a super guy. I think Janice McCrary came in when we had an embezzlement at this board. You ever heard of that?
No, I have not.
Well, then I
Is
won't.
that something?
Do
that,
tell.
Is that something that we don't talk about?
Then I'll wash my mouth of it, okay? But she came in when the board was in crisis because of that. And she was the GAD, the Government Affairs Director, a beautiful woman, very talented, a CPA. She came in overnight, was made the executive officer, and she righted the ship. I salute Janice McCrary.
Very nice. And I'm sure that probably a lot of the protocols and rules that we have and that we follow today as a board are stemmed from that, or?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that she came in and put the thing together when we weren't sure how bad it was.
Okay.
That's when Carnham moved out of this building and went up on Academy
Okay.
and separated themselves out. In other words, there are issues and crises and opportunities all along the way, every decade, and she helped meet those. Max Manser did, Walt Williams did, and Kent Cravens. My gosh, what's going on with the building? Is it being worked on right now?
Yeah, there's a construction.
Can you still see the sky from inside?
I probably so. I haven't been back there in a week or so.
From the rainstorm. But I think Kent Craven's is superb.
Yeah. No,
And I really enjoyed that meeting last Friday with the food trucks.
Yeah, it was
and
great,
the tents.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, no, I
We
was
actually got
really
together.
impressed. It was nice.
And the
that
mayor
everybody-
was there to give a speech. and
It was
so
really
forth.
nice for everybody to get to be around each other again.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you really
Yeah.
don't realize that you miss so much being away for a year, and then all of a sudden you get to see everybody again.
Well, they
and
do,
actually
but
shake hands and-
if you see them after a year or two, you have to work to recognize them.
Yeah, especially after seeing everyone with masks on. Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, I was thinking of people getting a year older.
I heard that too. Yeah.
Well, and luckily Gar takes care of us with all of our name tags. And stuff,
That helps.
when we get here.
But anyway, I salute Kent Cravens.
Yeah, Kent does a great
And-
job.
and
We're
the
definitely
staff.
lucky to have him. There's an incredible staff, and that
Incredible.
and that's really one of those things is when you first join, and the association itself, there's just so much to offer. I think the new realtor, that's one of the biggest things that we can offer to them is just to invite them in and show
Oh,
them
yes.
show them what
But
the
you have the
organization can
names
do.
go on: Laura,
Yeah.
Claire Conrad,
Yeah.
Nathan,
Mhm.
Gabe,
Yeah.
and all the
Believe
rest.
me, this show would not be in existence if it weren't for Gabe. Gabe like literally
Well,
carries
tell me,
us.
is this broadcast really live?
Yes, sir. It is.
So
it
it's
is
not,
live
not
right now.
it's not a scam.
No, sir. Absolutely. We're live right now. There's probably people commenting on Facebook.
No, I thought you
right
maybe
now.
got me in here and it's something that was only fake.
No, sir. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We are kind of coming towards the end of our show.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions that you have for Lou, Rob?
I mean, I could pick your brain about stuff all day.
I'm sure we could talk to you
we've-
for hours.
We've touched on
Just
we've touched on
one
interest
tick at a
rates and
time.
stuff. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But I really want to talk about historical interest rates because we touched on it a few times. But I don't know if we have enough time for all that, unless you want to jump into it.
About the history?
Well, I mean, you talked about how high interest rates were, and I know a lot of times that's what we use, not necessarily as a sales tactic, but we're constantly reminded of that, and I need to constantly remind that of my clientele, but I also would like the realtors to remind people of how historically low our rates
I'll
are.
say this, through my involvement as a realtor through the years, if people don't know what to say, they'll say, how's the market?
Yep.
And a realtor should know something about the market nationally, something about the state, something about the local area, because people think you should know that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we talked about it. Rentals are scarce. Listings are scarce. Interest rates are low right now. Inflation may be around the corner. Maybe it's not. And I'm just saying, so what we have an obligation to do as a professional to have a finger on the pulse.
Okay.
Yeah, and not
Because
just
people count on us to know something.
absolutely, and the way I see it is not just narrow focused on where our market is right now, but historically
Well,
as well.
well, historically and
I think
larger
that's a-
pictures.
Mhm.
And interest rates are controlled by what entity?
Oh, the Fed.
The Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
And so they move them up, they move them down. They moved them way down to help the stock market recently, in the last 5 years. Because if people are going to buy stocks that are going up, they're not going to buy bonds at 2% or 1.5%. Also, you've heard of negative interest on some of the bonds around the world. So it forces the money to go into equity.
Okay.
So the whole thing is manipulated,
Yeah.
hopefully for the good.
Right.
And so I just say stay on top of things and be optimistic, be involved, and be a professional.
That's certainly a good message for our realtor listeners out there, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lou.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you
my
for
pleasure.
having me.
Thank you for
I
having
really
me.
I like the idea that you said where, you have an interesting perspective because you're looking in the past and the future at the same time.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm the link to the past and the future.
Well, and what a great tool.
And that means I can help you in the present.
Thank you very much. for
Okay,
being
you
here and
bet.
helping
Thanks for
us.
having me on.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Lou.
you.
We're going to get into our announcements then.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Leap into Leadership event coming up on August 4th. Do stand by on the GAR website for that. And we
That
have
should be a lot of fun. That's going to be a panel talking about how to join the association and how joining in and taking being a member here and joining in leadership actually can promote
Wonderful.
and
Wonderful.
help your career.
Yeah. And so the backpack drive, do you have more details on that?
Backpack Drive is being put on. It is current by, I think the GAP committee is hosting it this year. And basically this is for Title I school children.
Wonderful.
We've been doing this for, I think it's the 5th or 6th year now that GAR's done it.
Wonderful.
They've been very, very successful in the past couple of years. So, grab a backpack or you can always just donate to the fund as well.
Yeah, and then school supplies as well, right?
Yes, and I believe that's all on the gar.com or
Yeah.
on the GAR Facebook page, that information as well.
Yeah, check it out now while we're talking about it, because I'm sure you're going to want more details. And also coming up in August, we have Melody Marr for a guest going into talking about ethics for our podcast, and definitely excited to do that. Right after our podcast, remember, next month will be our first coffee meetup since pre-pandemic times. I'm excited. It's going to be at Little Bear, and we're securing that as we speak. So just definitely watch out for that. We're going to push some more stuff out.
Tune into our podcast and then come meet me and Robin and Nika and our guest at Little Bear and have some coffee with us afterward. We talk about, as you talked about ethics, remember the reason we're talking about ethics is right now we're at the end of the cycle where by, I think it's December 31st, there's almost 2,000 realtors that still have not completed their code of ethics requirement for this period.
Really?
I think 1,919 is what it says on the sign right now.
I teach a 4-hour ethics class.
If you need ethics, contact Lou.
LouTulga.com or go to LouTulga@gmail.
There you go.
Hey.
There you go. Get
commercial.
those ethics classes taken
And
care
Melody
of.
Marr,
Yep.
our person here, is pure gold. She's
Yes.
wonderful.
Well, and that
Oh, yeah.
we invited Melody because we found that a lot of people have no idea who she is until they don't
No.
want to know who she is.
She is such a
but she is
benefit to this
incredible.
board.
And she does great things for us.
She's wonderful. She could not be better.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And then what else do we have? We have Denim and Diamonds coming up in September.
Yeah.
That benefits our pack. And then the next big YPN event is going to be our annual Halloween.
Yeah,
I
Halloween
think
party
that's
coming up
the
in
next
October.
couple things coming up, right?
Absolutely, and then obviously more details to follow for our September and October events.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys.
it's a lot of fun. Thanks again, Lou.
Is it over?
I think that should be it.
Thank you.
Thank you very
We
much.
went in different direction than you anticipated.
Yeah, but I think we did really well.